Welcome to my overview of the Bright Angel Trail. This trail is found on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, right behind the Bright Angel Lodge. This is arguably the easiest trail in the whole Grand Canyon. As I go through, I'm going to point out some of the features and what it takes to actually hike this trail. So here's the entrance itself. Again, it's located to the left and behind the Bright Angel Lodge. There is a parking lot nearby. It's fairly small though, and it tends to fill up. Also, there's some limited parking a little further away, but it's best to get bussed in because it can be kind of difficult sometimes, unless you're staying overnight, to find parking here. Shortly after starting the trail, you're going to run into your first informational signs. There's a slew of these on the way down the trail. They point out different things, point out different features, warnings, history, all sorts of stuff. They're kind of neat and they're worth taking the time to stop and reviewing them. Right off the bat, too, you run into a warning sign. As you can see here, it looks funny, but it's pretty serious. The temperatures in the summer can get to the extreme level in the Grand Canyon. Attempting to hike from the rim to the Colorado River and back in a day would be difficult for the most fit person and most well-equipped person. It is extremely difficult and it is not recommended. Other than the heat, are there any issues? Well, yes, there are. You're gaining and losing 5,000 feet. On top of that, it's over 7 miles one way. So all three of those things combined make it an extreme challenge to attempt to make it to the Colorado and back in a day. Throughout the Grand Canyon and even on the trail itself, there are multiple places to get clean water. Why this sign has to exist is beyond me. Seriously, who looks at a toilet and thinks, oh, I need water, I'm going to fill up? Pretty quickly after you start, you're going to run into your first, it's basically a cave. It's a hole that they blasted in the canyon wall for the trail itself. Now, you'll notice in this picture, the ground's kind of icy. In the winter, it's pretty common to have snow and ice on the first few miles of the trail. Crampons are recommended. I brought them and I used them because, it was very slick. I'll next put up a photo of why you desperately want good traction here. If you look at the bottom of this photo, you'll notice that's a sheer drop. The top of this trail on the right-hand side as you descend tends to be very steep and drop off quickly. This is why you really want some good traction. Now, the trail itself is fairly wide, but still, you don't really want to take any chances when you have a drop to your right that's hundreds of feet. You'll also notice as you go, if you look down in the muddy areas that maybe are frozen or are fresh, you're going to see hoof prints. Yeah, mule terrains run on this trail year-round, so that's something you have to account for. Make sure you always give way to them. Just get out of the way, stick close to the wall, and they'll just go right by. They're well-trained. It's not really an issue as long as you don't do anything dumb. As you descend, you'll notice the first section you're going to face, it's a yellowish color. The second section is then red, and you're actually going to descend 3 or 4 more sections. Now, you can also use these to track your progress back up. I'll tell you this, the yellow goes pretty quick. It's not very long. It's kind of like it's a boost in the arm when you're hiking back up and you hit that yellow band. The red seems to go on forever. It is punishing. Now, you'll notice a lot of the trail kind of looks like this. It's well manicured, it's well built, it makes the terrain very easy. If you're used to hiking in the White Mountains and you go hiking on this, it's going to be a cakewalk. But don't let that get into your head. The reason is, you could easily go way too far because the terrain is too easy and not be able to get yourself back up to the rim before dark falls. I should clarify, I meant the White Mountains of New Hampshire. There are multiple White Mountains out there. Another thing that's going to slow you down a little bit, whether you're going up or down, is stuff like this. There's some parts that you're just going to stop and just gawk at because the scenery is stunning. And you see different things, both on the ascent and the descent. After 1.5 miles, you're going to come across your first rest house. These are normally broken up between a shelter and a restroom. and depending on the time of year, you can also get water here. Now, you can see from this photo, they're pretty scenic. They lay these out quite nicely. And once you get to them, you're going to notice it's an open-face shelter that you can sit in, just take a breather, get out of the sun especially. That's one of the big reasons these are here, so you can cool off. During the hot times of year, they are a lifesaver. You're also going to notice they have some warning signs in here as well. They're going to give you the heads up, and they do this because at the 1.5 miles, you can still get out if you're starting to struggle. If you get much further, it gets that much more difficult to rescue you. When you're on the main wall, this is the kind of terrain you're going to run into. It's a lot of switchbacks. There are even times when you kind of wish that they had straightened it out a little more and added more elevation to the hike, but they made it so almost anyone can at least do sections of the trail. After what can feel like forever, you finally start hitting sections of the trail that straighten out and you're no longer doing switchbacks. This can be a real shot in the arm because it finally feels like you're making progress and the scenery really starts to change once you get to this section here. So here is a view looking back at the progress you've already made. You can see you conquered that entire wall up ahead and you've cleared a decent distance from the base of that wall up to this section. That brings us to the next section itself, the Indian Garden. Now, this is a fairly flat area. It's a campground, and you have to have a permit to camp there. Also in this area, you can get water if you need to refill anything, and there's a fork in the trail. To the left brings you to a nice overlook, but it's miles out. To the right, you continue on down the Bright Angel Trail. In this section, it's imperative to stay on the trail. You can see from this photo, on both sides of the trail, it's lush with vegetation. It's a lot of cactus, trees, and other plants that can be easily damaged if you go walking or try to trailblaze off of here. After Indian Garden, you actually enter into like a mini canyon area. This is a really scenic stretch. There's some running water, and the terrain is kind of unique. And it's neat, as you go, you also see that there's a waterfall down in here. The one catch for this area is it can be kind of narrow, so if one of the mule trains comes by, you really got to hug the wall to let them go. Near the end of the canyon section, you're going to run into this, what I call a grove. This is an unbelievably scenic little spot. The photo really doesn't do it justice. There's a big crop of trees on your left, and the terrain really flattens out for a little bit to give you a break. After a kind of miserable section where you actually have to cross the small river a couple of times, that's when I ran into the mules for the first time, and you can see them here. Yeah, you're going to run into them probably a couple times at least if you spend a day on this trail. But right after I ran into them, I hit this section here. It's the beginning of the bottom canyon, and this is when this trail gets incredibly scenic. I will warn you, even in the winter, when you get to this section, the temperatures go up. It's noticeable. Up the rim, it was below freezing. Down in here, it was about 65 to 70, so it was quite noticeable. The terrain is a little harder in this section, but it's not too bad. You get a glimpse of it here in this photo. You can see the trail. They still rely heavily on switchbacks as you descend. One thing to keep in mind when you're down here too, these rocks are old. I'm talking really old. Descending the Bright Angel Trail is almost like walking back in time. Each layer you descend through is older and older and older. It's one of the fascinating things about the Grand Canyon. Now for a little story and a warning. You will see these squirrels all over the place. Do not feed them. They bite, they carry fleas, which in this section of the country can carry the plague. These squirrels are unbelievably aggressive. This squirrel here, I was sitting down and having something to eat. He came up to me. So I stood up and he kind of scurried back and I sat down again. He started coming towards me again. So again, I stood up and kind of made a threatening motion towards him. And he scampered off. Sat down again. He came up to me again. This time when I stood up, he kept coming. I had to grab my trekking pole and poke him with it to get him to go away. See, that's what happens when people feed these guys. They're not pleasant. They will bite. And people feed them all the time, so now they're very aggressive. So please, do not feed any of the wildlife you see on this trail, or in the national parks, period. You might be looking at this photo and thinking, hey, wait a minute, this looks like it's higher up in the canyon. Well, that's because it is. I didn't make the Colorado River. I hit my turnaround time, and I started back up. And I implore everyone who hikes this trail, if you are not staying over at one of the campgrounds, have a turnaround time. Every year, people have to get rescued off this trail. The vast majority of people who get rescued are between 20 and 40 and in good shape. They either push themselves too far, or they run out of daylight and don't have the equipment to get themselves back up. So please, have a turnaround time. Make sure you get back up so you don't put anyone else in danger because you get stuck. And like I said, there are some things that you just notice when you're coming back up. Like how the trail is built. I never noticed going down, but coming back up, I noticed a bunch of these retaining walls that they actually took the time to build throughout the whole trail. This trail really is manicured. They spent a lot of time and effort in building. And if you use a good turnaround time, it gives you time to relax on your way up and to stop and really just soak it all in. This is just one shot where I looked down and there were some people hiking below me, so I just snapped a photo off. Time and time again, you're going to see just fascinating things that you did not notice on the way down. Because I took the time and got back up to the rim well before dark, I was able to go and see some of the other scenic views along the rim of the Grand Canyon. There's a road that goes up and down that has all sorts of different places to stop and a number of overlooks. No two views are the same. It changes constantly, especially as the sun starts to set. Now you notice in the last photo I put up, it was Hermit's Rest. That's the last stop on this part of the Grand Canyon. It's a nice area with a nice parking lot. You can go there, and this is where we got to see the sunset. It really was a long day, though. Grand total, between the trail itself and going up on the rim after, I did over 17 miles, and I did not make the Colorado. I didn't make it to the Colorado, but I got to see it. Yeah, from one of the overviews, you can actually see the Colorado River. So here it is. Thought it was a good way to finish off. Keep in mind, grand total, again, I did about 17 miles this day. If you wanted to make it to the Colorado and back in a day, it's roughly 15 miles and 10,000 feet of elevation change. That's a lot. That's very difficult for even the most fit person. You're far better off, if you want to make the Colorado, staying at Indian Garden or one of the other campgrounds on the way down, and then taking your time the next day to come back up. So here's my last photo. You'll see if you really look close, you notice it shows a large section of the trail. It gives you kind of an idea of just how big the trail is. Well, I hope you really enjoyed this overview. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And thanks for watching.